ceasefire that may well be enacted. It is the Middle East, after all, and it was another day of violence there. Rockets being fired back and forth. Israeli troops still gathered for a possible ground invasion of Gaza. Tonight, President Obama has sent Secretary of State Hillary Clinton to the Middle East to see if something can be done to quiet the fight that the world has been watching for a week. Earlier today, it seemed that ceasefire was all but done, but instead, it's been one of the most lethal days of the conflict yet.
Israel says Hamas rocket fire from Gaza continues despite its intense targeting of rocket launch sites in Gaza. Israel reports 5 dead so far, and Israeli military strikes continue to pound away at targets in Gaza City. Palestinians say at least 137 people have been killed in the onslaught. And US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has been in urgent talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
This footage is believed to show an Israeli attack on the house of a senior Hamas militant, though we haven't been able to fully verify it. And in Gaza last night, 2 local journalists were killed when their car was hit.
These Israelis are going insane. They did everything. They lost their minds. Actually, after killing our children, killing our civilians, targeting everything, today they are targeting journalists.
Hamas have shown their missiles can reach deep into Israel's territory. This block of flats is not far from Tel Aviv. Diplomacy has not yet brought an end to the violence. The American Secretary of State Hillary Clinton called for calm to be restored, but Israel insists its people have to be protected.
In Israel, the diplomatic day ended for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in talks with US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Tuesday had started with hopes the 7th day of violence between Israel and Gaza would close with a ceasefire. Hamas had reported the Egyptian brokered truce would start at nightfall. It fell apart, with claims Israel had not responded to the proposals. Hillary Clinton said the latest outbreak of violence will sharpen the focus of politicians.
Thank President Obama, you and the American government and people for their strong support for Israel in this hour of need. I want to also thank you especially for your support of Iron Dome. It's been saving lives, and we are in a battle to save lives. One of the things that we're doing is trying to resist and counter a terrorist barrage which is aimed directly at our civilians, and doing so by minimizing civilian casualties, whereas the terrorist enemies of Israel are doing everything in their power to maximize the number of civilian casualties. Obviously, no country can tolerate a wanton attack on its civilians. Now, if there's a possibility of achieving a long-term solution to this problem through diplomatic means, we prefer that. But if not, I'm sure you understand that Israel will have to take whatever action is necessary to defend its people.
President Obama asked me to come to Israel with a very clear message. America's commitment to Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering. That is why we believe it is essential to de-escalate the situation in Gaza. The rocket attacks from terrorist organizations inside Gaza on Israeli cities and towns must end, and a broader calm restored. The goal must be a durable outcome that promotes regional stability and advances the security and legitimate aspirations of Israelis and Palestinians alike.
Israeli forces carried out airstrikes and fired shells at the Gaza Strip in the latest round. The conflict has so far killed 130 Palestinians. Hamas and other Palestinian militants are counterattacking by firing rockets and mortar shells into Israel. They killed 2 more Israelis, bringing the number of dead on that side to 5. Hundreds of people in Gaza are taking refuge at schools run by the UN. Palestinian refugees account for more than 70% of Gaza's population. They were forced off their land after the 1948 founding of Israel and during subsequent wars.
As the negotiations continue, so too does the exchange of fire between Israel and Gaza. Throughout the day, rockets were fired into Israel, and in return, bombardment of the Gaza Strip from air and sea. On Tuesday evening, Hamas and Islamic Jihad announced there had been a breakthrough in truce talks mediated by Egypt.
In the coming hours, there will be a formal announcement from Cairo of the victory of the Palestinian resistance. The announcement will ensure the end of the criminal war on Gaza.
But almost immediately, Israel poured cold water on suggestions a deal had been done, saying the talks were not there yet. The UN Secretary-General has been visiting Jerusalem trying to bolster the diplomatic efforts. In a joint news conference with the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu said any ceasefire deal would need to be a lasting one. Ban Ki-moon urged both sides to come to an agreement quickly and warned against an Israeli ground offensive. But thousands of troops remain in place on the Gaza border, a reminder that this crisis isn't over yet.
And around this area, a few hundred meters away, on numerous occasions, fighters here in the Gaza Strip have launched rockets towards Israel, and that's brought in airstrikes. And so when they do go off, they're extremely, extremely loud and rather frightening. Talking of frightening, a lot of people in Gaza have spent the night on the move because they've received leaflets from the Israeli military telling them to get out of their homes, telling them exactly which roads to take and where they should go, namely to central areas of Gaza City, where United Nations schools have opened up to let them sleep for the night, or perhaps to sleep for several nights. Nobody knows exactly the timescale of how long they're going to be forced to go there, and that nobody knows exactly where, of course, all this momentum for a ceasefire has gone, because on Tuesday there were very positive noises coming out of Cairo signalling that Hamas and Israel were about to agree to a ceasefire, at least in the short term. But people here are still very conscious that there are Israeli troops ready to come into the Gaza Strip, roads around the Gaza Strip closed. Everybody here really feels that it could go either way.